Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. It's Wednesday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, digital sports producer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, back after a one-week hiatus with Joe Starkey for our weekly Joe Starkey mailbag video. Joe, I was having technical difficulties last week and let us down, so I apologize for that.
You were already forgiven for that, Adam. I never thought twice about it.
It turned out it was just a little switch on the side of my laptop. It was quite embarrassing that I did not know the switch was there just to turn the camera on and off. But after about 45 minutes, I figured it out.
Glad to be back. Glad that you're back. Glad that we're back.
Absolutely. Well, if you're just joining us for the first time, this is our weekly video with Joe where we kind of touch on some of the topics that he touches on in his printed mailbag. I'll include the link to that down in the description. So make sure you check out the printed version. But Joe, your big question this week is, I think who is the Pittsburgh coach doing the best job among all of them? And you answered by giving a report card on everyone. So I'm just going to set you up there. Who do you think is doing the best job? What grade did you give them, and what grade did you give some of these other guys, and why?
Well, if it's based on all of their most recent seasons, then the only one who would get an incomplete is Derek Shelton, and he's on his way to a pretty good grade, at least through the first semester. He's got all his big tests coming up, his final exams later in the year, but so far he's off to a good start. And I think Jeff Capel's an easy call as the only A for his most recent season. I mean, honestly, he took a team that nobody picked to go to the NCAA tournament that was seemingly falling apart early in the year, that had a lot of guys who didn't even know each other 8 months ago, and took them to a couple tournament wins, depending on how you define tournament wins. I thought he did a fabulous job this season. These aren't career grades. These are the most recent. I was asked about their most recent seasons. He gets an A. Shelty gets a B+ so far. Mike Tomlin got a C for last season. He had a team that was expected to be mediocre, and that's what they were. Mike Sullivan got a D. He had a team that was expected to be, I think, a little better than they were. Certainly they expected to make the playoffs, and they saw that streak end. Pat Narduzzi was kind of in the Tomlin boat, I thought, sort of, if anything, delivered what people thought, but probably a little bit less. And that's the story of the coaches. That's the report cards.
You wanted to dig in on Tomlin with you a little bit. Yeah, I think somebody asked you, how long do you think he can coach, if he continues to produce the way he is? And you said you think he's going to stay around for as long as he wants, even if they have these, I guess, C-level seasons is the correct answer there. Why do you think that? And do you not think that the pressure is going to be turned up on him, given that, Kenny Pickett's on a rookie deal? I think I kind of look at his career in three phases, which was early on. He had all the success with, those, for lack of a better term, Bill Cowher teams that were built by, the previous regime. Then he had that Killer Bees era where he had a lot of talent, and I don't think that talent ever lived up to it. And then I think you have this late Ben career arc, right? And into now with the beginning of Kenny Pickett, where you didn't really know where to set expectations given what you were getting at the quarterback position, from year to year. Do you think the fact that they're now making this turn into, what you would expect to be a more competitive window than maybe the last 5 years has any impact on the pressure that's going to be on him?
Here's what I think. You and I could say the last 5 years have been underachieving. I think Art Rooney doesn't think Mike Tomlin's had a bad year. I think nationally, people were talking about Mike Tomlin as coach of the year last year. I think Art probably thinks he did a great job. Did a great job the Duck Hodges year. Did a great job the 11-5, 12-4 year, whatever it was. Even though the season ended with an embarrassing loss at home to Cleveland. Probably thought he did a good job just to get the late stage bend to the playoffs. So when I think about, and I don't think Tomlin is on the hot seat right now, necessarily should be, at least this season. But if you're thinking about a coach who would be fired, then I would think when he's been around this long, it would be a cumulative thing. It wouldn't be one bad year. So when does Art actually think that Tomlin has had a bad year? Like, when would that clock start of, oh, now he's on the hot seat. Now Art thinks things are going south. Art thinks he's done a great job every year. So when people ask me, could Tomlin ever be fired or what would it take? I say, no, I don't think so. I think he can coach here. I think he has a lifetime job here if he wants it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because, like I said, I don't know if I think I might agree more with the Steelers from that perspective of, I think they got the most out of these teams with Ben Roethlisberger these last handful of years that they could have. And then last year with the quarterback situation that they were in. And I guess I give Tomlin credit for that, but I think now is when you start grading on a higher curve, right? Is because Kenny Pickett's on a rookie deal. You can spread that salary cap money around. So I'll be interested to see if the pressure does ramp up, if he has like a similar season, because I think people's expectations are naturally going to be higher, right, Joe?
You mean like Art's expectations or
No,
fans'
I mean the
expectations?
fan bases. I think the fans and probably more outside than inside. That you've spent all this money, you've made all these moves, you've got a guy that you hope is your franchise quarterback in place. If things don't work out now, I feel like there's fewer excuses than when Ben has an elbow injury, right, or when Ben's clearly in decline in the last season of his career.
Yeah, you might be right about that, but somebody should tell Art. I'm just not sure that he agrees with that. I think the pressure is they say it's the same every year on the Steelers. Tomlin said last year he was going to have a great and dominant defense. They thought they were going to win last year. They brought in Mitch Trubisky because he had been to playoffs. He had led teams to the playoffs. They spent a bunch of money last year on free agents. So I'm not sure that it's so different now. But for me and you, it might be. I think the expectation should be higher. They won 9 games last year, and they had a really good draft, brought in a bunch of pieces, and have a second-year quarterback. Yeah, they should definitely better make the playoffs this year. They should have a top 5 defense this year. Matt Canada better do a job this year. Mike Tomlin, you would think, has tied himself to Canada, but I think that Canada would be made a sacrificial lamb, and that Tomlin would stay, even if they went like 5-12 this year.
I think you set me up well, Joe, because someone else in your mailbag asked if maybe the expectations externally are getting a little out of control for the Steelers, and you said no because you specifically like the schedule, pointing out that they play some pretty bad teams from last season. Could you expound on that a little bit? And do you think that this is a good team, or do you think this is a team that is going to take advantage of a bad schedule and maybe come playoff time, maybe not be ready for prime time?
That's a good question. I think it's a pretty talented team, maybe a little top end heavy, but it should definitely be a playoff team. I like Kenny Pickett. I do. I think they have a good young quarterback. He's got some talent around him on offense. Their offensive line is better, and their defense has stars on it, and they have a crappy schedule. So if they don't improve from last year, I think that's a horrible season for them. Injuries notwithstanding. I also expect TJ Watt to be healthy. So I think the bare minimum is 10 games this year. And I picked them, I think, the other day on the air to go 11-5-1. Other people, constantly have low expectations. And then when Mike Tomlin goes 9-8, they say he's coach of the year. How about raising the expectations a little bit?
Well, I certainly agree with that, Joe. Just like I think I narrated, this is the time you got to win. I think it's easier to win now in this window that the Steelers are in than at any other point because you can have deep teams. We've seen that with the Eagles. We've seen that with the Chiefs. We're seeing it with the Bengals, Josh Allen and the Bills. They all kind of have that connective tissue of young quarterback on a cheaper deal surrounded by really good players and a really good roster. And the Steelers are entering that now. And so I think what you're saying is completely fair. Joe, last NFL question I had for you is, what do you think of this Thursday night flex scheduling that they have introduced? I think people are really upset about it generally because there's been a question of what happens if a team gets flexed from a Sunday into a Thursday and a fan had bought a hotel room in Pittsburgh for a Sunday and the game gets moved up 3 days. I mean, it really does not seem fan friendly, especially for the teams involved. I think if it's me as a viewer, do I want to see a good primetime game every week in that Thursday spot? Maybe.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of fan friendliness, it's a real step back.
Only maybe. Do you want to see a good game every Thursday? I definitely do. So, while I have some degree of sympathy for some guy in Detroit who spent money on a trip to Las Vegas, if it means I'm seeing a crappy game that week, I think that the vast majority of fans should be the ones that the NFL thinks about, and that's the viewers. It's
I mean, that's fair.
very simple to me. I hate to sound insensitive, but I really don't care about somebody's travel plans who's an Arizona Cardinals fan. I really don't. And if it means that I get to watch a better game and they're inconvenienced, I'll take me watching the better game every single time, because it's not just me. As Jerry Jones said, this caters to the vast majority of our fans, not necessarily the ticket buyers from a given market on a given week. Oh, well, I want the better game. I love that the NFL did this. I don't want to sit through Panthers Falcons from last year or Commanders Bears from last year. Get that game out of here. And again, I feel bad for the guy from Chicago who had to change a plane ticket, but not that bad.
What would you say to the criticism of, like, you're not going to get the best out of Chiefs Bills? It's Chiefs Bills on a Thursday night because it's a short week. The teams are probably going to play a little more vanilla than they might have otherwise. It's maybe a great matchup, but is it going to be a great game in terms of the football we're watching?
Well, that's a different question. Is Thursday night football in general a good idea? Not necessarily, no. But again, if I'm given the choice of Bears Commanders and Steelers Ravens or Cowboys 49ers, I'll take the latter. And so will 14 million other people. I was just looking at the ratings from last year. Their good games would get upwards 10, 11, 13 million, and the bad games would get 6 million, 7 million. I mean, who are we catering to here? The person who buys a ticket, again, the person who buys a ticket in Denver, I can't worry about that. Amazon paid $1 billion. You need to cater to the greater good, and the greater good is your television audience.
I'll tell you what, I did like the Amazon package a lot last year. I'd like to see those guys get a chance to do some big games because I thought it was beautiful, the streaming, because they get to do everything in 10K unlike, your cable. So I thought those games looked beautiful. The presentation was great, and I liked the studio personalities. Joe, transition quick here into baseball. Someone in your mailbag asked about the revised MLB schedule and how you feel about that. There's a lot more interleague this year. I think every team is playing every team for the first time in baseball history. You seem to be in favor, and I tend to agree with you, but I'm going to let you explain your reasoning there.
Well, yeah, there's a lot less divisional games and a lot more interleague games. Their games against the Pirates, against the rest of the National League outside their division, basically remain the same. Yeah, I don't think there's any real sacred rivalries here that need to be protected. I can do with less Pirates Reds, Pirates Cubs, Pirates Brewers. Give me teams. Texas in town right now. That's interesting to me. I like that. I like playing the AL East. Give me more games against the rest of baseball and less against the division. I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. I like the variety, and there's just going to be different things on your TV than watching the Pirates face the same pitcher from Cincinnati for the 8th time. I find it more compelling television. I don't want them to overdo it with the interleague. I think a couple years ago when it was the pandemic and they were playing multiple series against AL Central teams, that felt a little weird. Granted, it was because of the pandemic, but it just felt weird. But I do like the variety and the change of pace. Joe, I also wanted to get into some Penguins talk. Kyle Dubas was the general manager from Toronto. He was let go, and he's been I think the first choice of a lot of fans out there. There's been a lot of anytime there's anything going on with Dubas, you hear about it, right? Because I think a lot of people want to bring him here. You mentioned in your mailbag that you're not as hot on his resume as some other people, so I wanted to give you a chance to kind of expound on that and explain why you're maybe not as high on him as some of the fans are.
I mean, I think he's helped put together a pretty nice roster there, and they were stuck with Tampa Bay, but their best player is Austin Matthews. He didn't draft him. He's played musical goaltenders. They haven't really won anything significant. So what's the huge attraction? I understand that he's a smart guy and he's done some smart things there, and I would definitely interview him. But I am certainly not in the camp of you got to get this guy. Not at all.
I know there are a lot of fans would probably say the reason is he's kind of an analytics whiz and kind of makes a lot of decisions based off of numbers. I think we can debate, and this has been my opinion with the Penguins. We can debate how much analytics should creep into front office decisions across all sports, not just hockey. Sometimes I think there's front offices that definitely get carried away with it. You can think about Neil Huntington with his 10,000 simulations comment of a few years ago that kind of was in the prelude to his firing. So I think there's definitely too much analytics. Do you ever worry that, generally speaking, the Penguins had a little too little of the analytics in the decision-making, and a little more in terms of, guys that Ron Hextall had history with? You think about Jeff Carter, Kasperi Kapanen as the son of one of his former teammates. Do you think the Penguins need to return some level of analytics into their front office compared to where they were under Ron Hextall?
You know what? I don't know how to quantify it. Doesn't every team have an analytics person? I see Jason Karmanos is one of the candidates mentioned, an analytics guy, sort of. Wasn't he here? Every team, I don't know how much they have of it compared to other teams. I don't. So it'd be impossible for me to answer that question. Do I think it's important? Of course. I think every team's on board with it. And I don't think the GM necessarily has to be an analytics guy. You hire those people. Jim Rutherford sure wasn't. It's not like he won 2 Stanley Cups 30 years ago. It was 6 years ago. I think the ability to make and execute a trade was Jim Rutherford's strength. And that's how Phil Kessel got here. And that's how Patrick Hornquist got here. And that's how Trevor Daley got here. And that's how a lot of guys got here. So I don't need to see, this is a new age analytics guy. Analytics is a part of every team in every sport, I believe now. I don't think anybody's lagging that far behind. Now, what you do with it, how much emphasis you put on it, that's another question.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess I just wonder how much the emphasis has been there with some of these decisions that they've made, and how many of them were made more for, what I like to call hockey guy reasons. And I kind of filed the Jeff Carter contract, which was one of the biggest mistakes of the Ron Hextall era, under that, kind of patronage hockey guy taking care of your guys bucket. Don't you, Joe?
Yeah, but nobody was complaining about Jeff Carter's analytics when he got here. It was the biggest story on the team, and then he got old. I think it was just a stupid mistake by Hextall, really, and he made several of them. I don't know that they were analytics-based necessarily, or lack of analytics-based mistakes. I just think he made bad decisions on certain players, Jeff Petrie was pretty good analytically when he helped Montreal to the Cup 2 years ago or 3 years ago. This year, not so much. I just don't think Ron Hextall was very good at his job. And I don't know that analytics, that having a grade A analytics system would have helped him that much. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. So, but this is what we got to do, Joe, when we're in has this been 2 months since Ron Hextall was fired? It feels like that long if it hasn't been that long, right?
Yeah, it does. And the draft is coming up, so they have to make a decision. I would bet that they'll make a decision by next week.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to finally having a name that we can chew over in a little more detail and stop talking about these things a little less opaquely. You know what I mean?
Yes, I agree.
All right,
thanks
Joe,
for having me, man.
Oh, no problem. Any final thoughts on the week?
Well, let's see what the Pirates do against the Rangers. If they can win a series here, we have Rich Hill with his 70-mile-an-hour curveball. I love watching him pitch. I didn't so much at the beginning of the year, but it's fun watching a guy with an old school approach. You talk about old school approaches. He's fun to watch. So we'll see if the Pirates can win a series and stay relevant here. They're hanging in there.
Yeah, I know. And it's kind of remarkable when you really think about how bad they've been for basically the entire month. And they can't possibly be that bad in some of these later months, right? And so the fact that they're still in it now, I think, is a good sign for this, at least staying interesting until Steelers training camp.
Yeah, staying relevant. And that would be new. I appreciate it, man. Thank you, Adam.
Absolutely. We'll talk to Joe again next week. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.